Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 7th of August 2018. Now, let us begin. Now, we have taken this article from page 7. Now, what this article talks about is that the three northeastern states, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura, are emerging as hotspots for HIV infections. And this information has been given in the HIV Centennial Surveillance Report. And this HIV Centennial Surveillance Study is conducted by the National AIDS Control Organization. Now, this HIV Centennial Surveillance Study that is conducted by the National AIDS Control Organization is also one of the largest regular studies in the world that deals with HIV in high-risk groups of population. Now, let us understand the reasons given in the report as to why the three northeastern states, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura, are emerging as new HIV hotspots. Now, the first reason given in the report for the increased HIV cases in Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura is because of the transmission of HIV through the use of shared drug injections. And the second reason for increased HIV cases is through the transmission of HIV through unsafe sexual practices. Now, hopefully up till here you've understood that Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura are emerging as new HIV hotspots. And this information is based on the HIV Centennial Surveillance Study that is conducted by the National AIDS Control Organization, wherein this study is one of the largest regular studies in the world which deals with HIV in high-risk groups of population. And the main reasons highlighted in this report for increased HIV cases in Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura is because first, due to the transmission of HIV through shared drug injections, and secondly, the transmission of HIV through unsafe sexual practices. Now, apart from this, the article highlights various steps that would be undertaken to reduce the risk of HIV infections. The first step highlighted in the report is that there would be prevention and intervention among high-risk population and in high-risk areas. Now, high-risk populations would mean sex workers, drug users, among others. And the various prevention and intervention initiatives that would be undertaken would be of provision of HIV screening test, provision of counseling and medical treatment, apart from other various initiatives of prevention and intervention. Apart from this, the second future step highlighted in the article would be the provision of antiretroviral treatment. Now, the antiretroviral treatment leads to effective suppressing of the HIV virus. And secondly, it also reduces the transmission of HIV from the infected person. So now hopefully up till here you've understood the future steps that have been highlighted in the article to reduce the HIV cases in Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura, wherein the first step highlighted in the article is that there would be an undertaking of prevention and intervention in high-risk areas and among high-risk populations. Now, high-risk populations include sex workers, drug users, among others, while the initiatives of prevention would include the provision of HIV screening tests, counseling and medical treatments, among other forms of initiatives. The second step highlighted in the article is that there would be a provision of antiretroviral treatment, wherein the antiretroviral treatment leads to an effective suppressing of HIV and also reduces the transmission of HIV from the infected person. So now hopefully up till here you've understood the basic crux of this article. Now let us understand as to where it would be placed in your UPSC examination syllabus. Wherein this article and the explanation given in this section would be placed in GS paper 2 within the section Social Justice and within the subsection Issues relating to development and management of health. Apart from this, various aspects such as antiretroviral treatment, the causes in the increased HIV cases, and who prepares the HIV Centennial Surveillance Study are important facts with regards to your prelims examination, wherein antiretroviral treatment and the reasons of HIV transmission would be specifically placed in the subsection General Science, wherein previously questions have been asked in your UPSC prelims examination, wherein the first question was asked in the prelims of 2013, wherein the question had asked which of the following diseases can be transmitted from one person to another person through tattooing. Now you have to understand that the formation of a tattoo requires a needle, and if the needle is infected, it can transmit HIV/AIDS from one person to another. And in similar terms, a question was asked in the prelims of 2010, which had asked with regards to the transmission of HIV, which of the following statement is not correct, wherein the first statement states that the chances of transmission from female to male are twice as likely as from male to female, wherein this statement is incorrect. The second statement states that the chances of transmission are more if a person suffers from other sexually transmitted infections, and this statement is correct. And the third statement states that an infected mother can transmit the infection to her baby during pregnancy, at childbirth, and by breastfeeding. And this statement is also correct. And the last statement states that the risk of contracting HIV from transfusion of infected blood is much higher than exposure to contaminated needle is also correct. And therefore, the following statement which is not correct would be A. And in similar terms, a question for your practice. And you can leave the correct answer of this question in the comment section given below. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 13. Now what this article talks about is that the Reserve Bank of India must resume issuing LoUs and LoCs, wherein LoU means letter of undertaking and LoC means letter of credit. And according to this article, our parliamentary panel has said that the Reserve Bank of India must resume issuing letters of undertaking and letters of credit. Now what had earlier happened? Earlier, LoUs and LoCs were the most popular financial instruments for trade credit, wherein the LoU and LoCs were the most cost-effective source of short-term credit in foreign currency. Wherein earlier 60% of the total bank finance for imports were through LoUs, and these LoUs and LoCs were accepted globally for imports and exports into India. However, what happened is that after the PNB fraud case, wherein Nirav Modi used LoUs that were issued by the Punjab National Bank to fraud the Indian banking sector, and it was after this PNB fraud case, the Reserve Bank of India discontinued the use of LoUs and LoCs. So now hopefully up till here you've understood is that the letters of undertaking and letters of credit were the most popular financial instruments for trade credit. And they were the most popular financial instruments for trade credit because they were cost effective for short term credit of foreign currency, wherein they made up 60% of the total bank finance for imports in India. And apart from this, the LoUs and LoCs were also globally accepted for imports and exports from India. But what happened is that Nirav Modi used LoUs that were issued by the Punjab National Bank to fraud the Indian banking sector. And it was after this PNB fraud case that the Reserve Bank of India discontinued the practice of issuing letters of undertaking and letters of credit. But now what has happened is a parliamentary committee report on commerce, which was tabled in the Rajya Sabha, has said that the RBI must now resume issuing the LoUs and LoCs. And this Parliamentary Committee report on commerce has also given the reasons as to why the RBI must resume issuing of LoUs and LoCs. When the first reason given in the report is that importers in India now rely on expensive sources of credit. When these expensive sources of credit, such as bank guarantees, have increased the cost of credit by 2 to 2.5%. And this increased cost of credit by 2 to 2.5% has reduced the competitiveness of India's import-export sector. So now hopefully up till here you also understood that the Parliamentary Committee on Commerce that has tabled a report in the Rajya Sabha has said that the Reserve Bank of India must now resume issuing of LoUs and LoCs. Wherein this Parliamentary Committee report on Commerce has also given reasons as to why the RBI must resume issuing of LoUs and LoCs, wherein the first reason given in the report is that importers now rely on expensive sources of credit such as bank guarantees, which has increased the cost of credit for them by 2 to 2.5% and thereby has reduced the competitiveness of India's import and export sector. And it is because of this reason that the Parliamentary Committee report on commerce has said that the RBI must resume issuing of LoUs and LoCs. So now hopefully up till here you've understood the focus of this article. Now you have to understand that this news is currently in transition and we'll have to wait and see on how the Reserve Bank of India moves forward with issuing of letters of undertaking and letters of credit. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from the editorial page on page 8. Now what this article talks about is that the author is trying to bring out the poor conditions of private industrial training institutes or ITIs. And moreover, the author also tries to suggest methods or reforms so as to ensure the effective functioning of private ITIs. When the views of the author is based on the Standing Committee on Labour report on Industrial Training Institutes and Skill Development Initiative scheme of the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So what we'll do with regards to this article is first understand the concerns with regards to our private industrial training institutes. And after that, we'll try to understand the measures to improve private industrial training institutes. So now let us begin by first understanding the concerns. Now, the first concern raised by the author is that there is a lack of regulator for quality and oversight. When this lack of regulator for quality and oversight has caused poor quality affiliation, assessment, and certification for private ITIs. The second concern raised by the author is that there is no collaboration between the private training institutes and industry employers. And because of this, the training system in private ITIs is not demand driven, meaning they're not training for the skills that are most demanded in the industry. The third concern raised by the author is that there is a disregard by private training institutes for norms and standards, wherein the criteria set by the National Council for Vocational Training is not followed. The fourth and the last concern raised by the author is of poor quality of infrastructure and teachers, wherein there is no set criteria for the number of classrooms, workshop, practice, and other aspects that should entail quality infrastructure and quality teachers. So now hopefully up till here you understood the various concerns that have been raised by the author with regards to industrial training institutes. Wherein the first concern raised by the author is that there is a lack of regulator for quality and oversight, and this has caused poor quality affiliation, assessment, and certification of private ITIs. The second concern raised by the author is that there is no collaboration between the private ITIs and industrial employers. And because of this, the training system that is provided by the ITIs is not demand driven, meaning that the private ITIs do not provide training for the skills that are most demanded by the industry. The third concern raised by the author is that there is a disregard for norms and standards, wherein the private ITIs are not following the criteria that has been set up by the National Council for Vocational Training. And the fourth and the last concern raised by the author is that there is a poor quality of infrastructure and teachers in private ITIs, wherein there is no set criteria on the number of classrooms, qualification of the teachers, salaries of the teacher, and other aspects that would entail good quality of infrastructure and teachers. Now let us understand the various measures to improve private industrial training institutes as highlighted by the author. Now the first measure to improve industrial training institutes as given by the author is to implement the recommendations given by the Shada Prasad Committee. However, the author does not go into the details as to what recommendations of the Shada Prasad Committee should be implemented. The second measure highlighted by the author is to establish a national board for skill development, wherein this national board of skill development can provide better oversights in terms of accreditation, assessment, certification, and other forms. The third recommendation given by the author is of a mandatory rating system that can provide quality of the institution to students and industrial employers. The fourth measure highlighted by the author is the improvement in internal infrastructure of ITIs, wherein there should be improvement in internal infrastructure of ITI such as of salaries of teachers, qualification of teachers, students-teacher ratio, size of classrooms, and other forms of internal infrastructure. And the fifth and the last recommendation given by the author is that there should be an involvement of employers in training. So now hopefully up till here you understood the 5 recommendations given by the author to improve industrial training institutes in India, wherein the first recommendation is to implement the recommendations of the Shada Prasad Committee. The second measure is to establish the National Board of Skill Development that can be used for the oversight of private ITIs for its assessment and accreditation. The third measure for improvement would be of a mandatory rating system that would provide the quality of the institution to students and employers. The fourth measure would be the improvement of the internal infrastructure of private ITIs in terms of teacher-student ratio, teachers' qualification, availability of classrooms, and other forms of internal infrastructure. And the fifth and the last recommendation given by the author is the involvement of employers in training so that the students are trained with the skills that are most demanded by the industry. So now hopefully up till here you've understood the measures given by the author to improve private industrial training institutes, wherein this lead editorial and the explanation given in this section would be placed in GS paper 2 within the subsection issues relating to development management of education. Wherein a question for practice is that the effective implementation of skill development in India is hindered by the lack of quality of training institutes. Highlight the causes for such and suggest measures for improvement. Wherein you can answer this question with the help of the editorial and the explanation given in this section. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 1. Now the reason this article is in the news is because the Supreme Court would consider whether Article 35A violates the basic structure of the Constitution. So with regards to this article, the first thing that we'll try to understand as to what is Article 35A. The second thing that we'll try to understand is what is the basic structure of the Constitution and what is the controversy with regards to Article 35A. So now let us first understand as to what is Article 35A. Now Article 35A grants the status of permanent residency to the residents of Jammu and Kashmir, and Article 35A was added to the Indian Constitution through the Constitution Application of Jammu and Kashmir Order of 1954. And this Article 35A applies to persons who shall be the permanent residents of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Wherein under Article 35A, any special rights and privileges can be given to the permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir. And apart from this, any restrictions can be imposed on any other persons who are not permanent residents of the state of Jammu and Kashmir under Article 35A. And these special rights and privileges to the permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir or restrictions with regards to non-residents of Jammu and Kashmir can be within the field of employment, acquisition of immovable property in the state, settlement in the state, and right to scholarships and other forms of aid that the state government of Jammu and Kashmir may provide. So now hopefully up till here you've understood the basic aspects that you need to understand about Article 35A. First, that it grants permanent residency to the residents of Jammu and Kashmir. And secondly, Article 35A allows any law that gives special rights and privileges to the permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir. And apart from this, Article 35A also allows any laws that puts up any restrictions on non-permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir in the fields of employment, settlement in the state, acquisition of immovable property, and right to scholarship and other aids of the state government. And it is within these three aspects that the Supreme Court would consider whether Article 35A is violating the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, to completely understand this news further, you need to also understand as to what is the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, the understanding of the basic structure of the Constitution is very important with regards to your prelims and mains examination. Now, the basic structure doctrine was given in the landmark judgment of Kesavanand Bharati versus State of Kerala. And as per this judgment, the basic structure of the Constitution of India cannot be altered or amended by the Parliament or the Executive, wherein the judiciary has the power of judicial review to see whether any law that has been made by the Executive violates the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, apart from this, what constitutes under the basic structure of the Constitution is not an exclusive list, wherein things can be added by the judiciary in the future in the list of the basic structure. Now, some of the features which are actually part of the basic structure of the Constitution are the supremacy of the Constitution, the republican and democratic form of government, the secular character of the Constitution is a basic structure, the separation of power between the legislature, executive, and the judiciary, the federal character of the Constitution, the mandate to build a welfare state contained in the directive principles of state policy, the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of the nation, and the essential features of the individual freedoms secured to the citizens are also part of the basic structure of the Constitution. And therefore, what you need to remember with regards to the basic structure is that it was given in the Kesavanand Bharati case. And the second thing that you need to remember is the purpose of the basic structure, wherein the basic structure of the Constitution cannot be altered or amended by the Parliament or the Executive. And apart from this, what you should also remember are the various features which are part of the basic structure of the Constitution. And the features given in this list are not exclusive, wherein the judiciary can add things further in the list of the basic structure. And with regards to this news, the Supreme Court is going to see whether Article 35A and the various provisions under this article violate the basic structure of the Constitution. As to whether Article 35A violates the basic features which are said to be part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Now let us understand as to what are the concerns with regards to Article 35A. Now let us understand as to why Article 35A has been challenged in the Supreme Court. Now Article 35A was added to the Constitution of India through a presidential order, and it is because of this reason that Article 35A is being challenged, wherein it is being challenged on the basis that an amendment of the Constitution can only be carried out through Article 368 by the Parliament, and the Constitution cannot be amended by a presidential order. And the second aspect on which it is being challenged is that the Article 370 with regards to the state of Jammu and Kashmir was a temporary provision, and therefore Article 35A is being challenged on the basis that the state of Jammu and Kashmir should now be at par with other states in the Indian Union. The third aspect on why Article 35A is being challenged is that the government of Jammu and Kashmir has discriminated against non-residents, as they are not allowed to buy property in the state, get government jobs, or vote in the local elections. And the fourth main aspect on which Article 35A is being challenged is that the permanent residence certificates that are given by the Constitution of the Jammu and Kashmir violates Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, wherein Article 14 of the Indian Constitution provides equality before law, wherein the state shall not deny to any person equality before the law and equal protection of the laws within the territory of India. And therefore, the permanent residence certificates that are guaranteed by the Constitution of the Jammu and Kashmir is considered to be violating Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, when the right to equality is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. So now hopefully you have understood as to why the Article 35A is being challenged in the Supreme Court on the basis that it violates the basic structure of the Constitution. Now you have to understand that this news is currently in transition, and we'll have to wait and see on how the Supreme Court moves forward with this. But hopefully you've gotten a basic understanding about Article 35A, the basic structure of the Constitution, and how whether Article 35A violates the basic structure of the Constitution. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 18. So what we'll do with regards to this article is understand various facts from the perspective of your prelims examination. Wherein the first fact that you should remember is that China successfully tested its first hypersonic aircraft. And this aircraft is named Xingkong 2 or Starry Sky 2. And by hypersonic, it generally means at least 4 times faster than the speed of sound and is generally considered as above Mach 5. Wherein the speed of the China tested hypersonic aircraft Xingkong 2 is of Mach 5.5 to 6. And apart from this, what you should also remember is that this aircraft is based on a special type of jet engine called a supersonic combustion ramjet or a scramjet engine. And this aircraft, because of its speed, can penetrate any current generation of anti-missile defense system. So now hopefully up till here you've understood that China tested the first hypersonic aircraft, wherein hypersonic means anything above Mach 5 or about 4 times the speed of sound. And this Chinese hypersonic aircraft is named Xingkong 2 or Starry Sky 2 and has a speed of roughly 5.5 to 6 Mach. And this aircraft is based on a scramjet engine and can penetrate any current anti-missile defense system. And the reason the understanding of the Chinese first hypersonic aircraft is important with regards to your prelims examination, because previously questions have been asked, such as the question on the Grease Lightning aircraft which was asked in the prelims of 2016, or the question on the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense that was asked in the prelims of 2018. And in similar terms, questions on foreign aircrafts and foreign defense systems have been asked in the prelims examination, and it is within this context that Xingkong 2 or Starry Sky 2 becomes relevant with regards to your prelims examination. And now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.